Alright, hi everyone. This is going to be a long video, so I will just say that right now, and I'm going to put some table of contents markers in the description below so you know where in the video you might want to watch. But just like the title says, this is my review of the Light Harmonic Geek Out portable headphone DAC and amplifier. So without further ado, let's go on with the unboxing of it first. I actually didn't unbox the official thing earlier, so I will just do that really quickly right now. On the front we have the Geek Out logo. On the bottom we have what it does and some of the specifications it has. And then on the back we have what it is and what it isn't. And then on the side panel here we have the different models that they originally wanted to release. So we have the Geek Out 1000, which is in red. We have the Geek Out 720, which is in black. The Geek Out 450, which is in silver. And the Geek Out 100, or also known as the Geek Out IEM for in-ear monitor. That was originally going to be white, but now they made the Geek Out 720 obsolete. So they replaced the Geek Out 100 with the Geek Out 720. So now the Geek Out 100 is black. So let's get this unboxed here. And inside the box we have a cardboard box here with the Geek logo. Inside of there we have the instruction manual, the warnings that are associated with it, and the warranty as well. So it does come with a 1-year limited warranty. Also in the box we have the USB extension cable here, also known as a slacker cable, so that you don't put all of the stress on your USB port wherever you plug in your Geek Out. You also have a carrying pouch, which is just kind of a velour material, and you have the Geek Out itself. So let's get that out. You may remember another unboxing I did, and I actually had another Geek Out. This one is the blue one. So here's the blue Geek Out. And as you can tell, the blue Geek Out is kind of shiny, like a classic metal glossy look. And on the back there's a guide to tell you what the sampling rate of your music is, as well as what output you're using for the bottom, where there are 2 headphone jacks. My red unit, on the other hand, is a matte finish. This is actually a manufacturing defect. There is, I believe, just one batch like this, so kind of a special unit, I guess. Same guide on the back. So a little bit of the Geek Out before I get into things. So these were funded on Kickstarter.com, which is a crowdfunding campaign website. So they raised money to create this product for the people who backed it, and now they're releasing it to the public for people to buy. So it's kind of a interesting concept to see audio products being developed by crowdfunding campaigns, but Light Harmonic was one of the bigger companies. They usually make digital analog converters that cost more than $10,000, so quite a big jump in terms of going from the super audiophile people to kind of the en masse. So just a little bit of Light Harmonic before we jump into things. Alright, so where to begin? There's a lot of stuff I want to cover in this video. I guess I'll start off with what it was and what it is now, and then I'll jump into the sound quality. So what it was on the Kickstarter campaign was just a portable headphone amplifier and USB DAC that you plug into your computer, and that would increase the power output to your headphones, as well as creating a nice clean digital to analog conversion that you can play pretty much any music file on your computer. So you can play PCM files up to 32-bit 384 kilohertz sampling rate, as well as DSD or direct stream digital up to 128, or 128 times the sampling rate of a CD. So that's what they advertised. These buttons that you see here, they're actually meant to be volume buttons. One of them is volume up, one of them is volume down, and then when you press both at the same time, it would activate what they called the 3D Awesomeifier effect, which basically created a crossfeed that would blend the left channel and the right channel a little bit to create a better center image. So that was the goal. What it is now, they've actually released a firmware update for the Geek Out, and that changed a lot of things. So the firmware, the first version of the firmware that they released with the Kickstarter units was, it was very buggy, to say the least. It would remember some volume settings, and so when you controlled the volume on your computer, it'd be different from the volume that the Geek Out remembers when you press the digital buttons here. And so a lot of people kind of blew out their eardrums by accidentally pressing the button, and remembered that it was at maximum volume, so their headphones would be blasted in their ears. Not very pleasant. I know a few people myself who actually did that accidentally. So after many months of testing and few beta testers and many months of figuring out what to do with this volume issue, they released another firmware version. So the original was version 1.0 and the current firmware is 1.5. So I would highly recommend people upgrade to version 1.5 if you have a Geek Out, just so that you can avoid the volume issue. And especially for the Geek Out 1000, you don't want to plug in your sensitive headphones and sensitive in-ear monitors with the old firmware, or else you might blow your headphones. So just a fair warning there. But speaking of the Geek Out 1000 versus 450, one of the problems that was associated with the firmware version 1 as well was the high noise floor. So when you activated the 3D Awesomeifier, that would actually raise the noise floor quite a bit, and most people didn't really like that. So that's why they got rid of that feature from version 1 and replaced it in version 1.5 with 2 digital filters that affect how your DAC converts digital audio into analog. So when you press the volume button, instead of adjusting the volume and remembering what volume settings it was from your computer, it actually changes the digital filter within the DAC. And the DAC chips in these units is the Sabre ES 9018K2M model. And so that actually has some digital filters built into it, but like Harmonic decided that they were only just okay, and they wanted to make their own digital filters that would be better. So instead, they replaced the regular digital filter that they were using in version 1.0, and they replaced it with 2 modes. One of them is called TCM, or time coherent mode, and that's actually a minimum phase filter. So it's basically the DAC chip allows certain frequencies to pass through and be reconstructed when it gets to the analog signal. So you have 0 hertz to 20,000 hertz, and then the DAC chip will roll off or attenuate signals after that. So the TCM mode, or time coherent mode, is a minimum phase filter. So it actually has a sharp cutoff near 22.1 kilohertz, which is about the Nyquist frequency of CD players, or a CD rather. And so that will cut off frequencies above 22.1 kilohertz. And when you input an impulse response for this DAC, what you will see is that usually with a brick wall filter, you will get some pre-ringing and then your main signal and then some post-ringing. What the minimum phase filter does is it changes the phase such that you don't get any pre-ringing, you get your main signal, and you get much more post-ringing. And the theory behind that is that nature doesn't have pre-ringing in anything that you hear. So if I snap my fingers, you shouldn't hear any pre-ringing in theory. And so the minimum phase filter attempts to replicate what nature does by not having the pre-ringing signal. The other digital filter that they include is what they call FRM, or frequency response mode. And that's basically kind of a slow roll-off version of a brick wall filter. It's a linear filter, so it's an impulse, finite impulse response, or FIR filter. So that's reconstructed with math, and you can get a nice flat line and then some pre-ringing, and then your main signal and some post-ringing, and then it becomes flat again. With the minimum phase, you get flat and then the main signal, and you get infinite amount of ringing, gradually decreasing over time, but never reaches zero. And that's what they call a infinite impulse response, or IIR filter. So the FIR filter in the frequency response mode, that one is a slow roll-off filter. So instead of cutting off the signals at 22.1 kilohertz, it slowly decreases in attenuation to maybe 30 kilohertz. And so what that does is it allows aliasing to get into the band that's being passed. So if you have a signal at say 20 kilohertz, it will create an alias at, I think, 24 kilohertz. And so that signal will actually get into your passband of the DAC. So this FRM mode does allow some aliasing to get into your passband. Larry Ho, the chief engineer at Harmonic, actually measured the THD values with the two different digital filters, and he found that the FRM mode actually has a lower THD rating than the TCM mode. So that's pretty interesting to note. Okay, that was a lot of technical speak. How do they sound? So moving on to the sound quality of how these sound. I'm mainly going to base my impressions on version 1.5 and not version 1.0 of the firmware, just because I believe that version 1.5 is what people should be listening to. So when Larry updated the firmware from version 1 to 1.5, he actually optimized what they call a 3L buffer, and that's the buffer between the USB port and the DAC, I believe. So he optimized that, and I was actually a beta tester for the version 1.5 firmware, so I could actually tell that the buffer difference was doing something to the music. It made the music sound less harsh to me. So I again recommend upgrading to version 1.5 for both the two digital filters that you get, as well as the improved 3L buffer. Alright, so between the two units, the Geek Out 1000 and the Geek Out 450, overall they sound very similar. Larry measured the difference between these, and he said that the Geek Out 1000 has a higher signal to noise ratio just because it can output more power, and that the Geek Out 450 has a lower THD number. And their production team, they wanted to make sure that the units all sounded pretty identical, and I believe they did a great job at that. When listening between the two, there's a very subtle difference between them. If you want one or the other, I would recommend that. I would not really recommend both unless you have a real need for both. So for the Geek Out 1000, I actually found it to have a lower noise floor than the Geek Out 450, which I thought was strange. So if you use sensitive in-ear earphones or sensitive headphones, I would definitely recommend Geek Out 1000 if you can manage the volume well, or the Geek Out 100 model, which I don't actually have, but that one was meant for use with sensitive headphones and in-ear earphones. The problem with the Geek Out 450 is that a lot of people, including myself, have reported that the residual noise that you hear when you just plug in your headphones, don't play any music, and you listen to how quiet the background is, you'll hear either nothing or some hiss or a lot of background hiss. And unfortunately, the Geek Out 450 has a lot of background hiss. I actually sent my unit back to Harmonic because I thought my unit was defective with that high amount of noise, and they said it was fine, and they actually provided me with some measurements of how this performs, and the noise was actually 19 microvolts, which is very high. Something like the Objective 2 here, it only has 3 microvolts at its worst, so a huge difference in terms of sound background noise there, which is unfortunate, but I guess that's the way things are. This unit passed their inspection test, so this is how the Geek Out 450 is like. So I think the higher noise floor of that affects the signal to noise ratio as well, because when I compare the two, although they sound very similar, I find that the Geek Out 1000 that I have here has a better amount of instrument separation that might be due to the blacker background of the Geek Out 1000 over the Geek Out 450. So I would recommend the Geek Out 450 if you use your everyday portable headphones or maybe some higher impedance headphones. I actually use my, let me grab this. I actually use my AKG K240 monitor, which is 669 ohms from what I measured, and that can be driven just fine with the Geek Out 450, so I have no problems with that in terms of volume. But if you listen to loud music, or you listen to music really loud, then I would recommend the Geek Out 1000 for those higher impedance headphones or harder to drive headphones or planar magnetic headphones. And again, the Geek Out 100 is meant for portable headphones as well as your sensitive headphones and in-ear monitors. So the difference in sound between the two is pretty minimal, apart from that higher amount of background noise in the Geek Out 450. So I will just talk about the Geek Out 1000 from now on, since that's kind of my reference point. Now, I actually compared the Geek Out 1000 to the Objective 2. I approximated the volume difference by ear, so it's not an exact volume matched testing, but I was able to actually tell a pretty big difference between the two when just A/B-ing music from one DAC to another. I actually had to write an Apple script to switch DACs quickly as I switched the headphone out from one amp to the other. So that made the process a little easier for me. I'll talk about the two filters of the Geek Out first before talking about how it compares to the Objective 2 and Objective DAC rather. So with the two modes that you have with the digital filters, I actually prefer the FIR filter, the frequency response mode, FRM, which is the volume down button, or the one closer to the USB port. So between the two filters, the TCM mode sounds a little bit harsher to me, as well as kind of limiting the sound stage of where I can find instruments around me. And so for that reason, I prefer the FRM mode, which kind of opens up that space a little bit. It reduces that harshness that I hear, and it kind of reduces the instrument separation a bit by kind of blending things together. But I would prefer the harsh, or the less harsh sound over the harsh sound of the TCM filter, which I think has better imaging abilities, but kind of that harsh sound that I was talking about. Other than that, I think the default mode when you plug in the Geek Out is the TCM mode, so it's the volume up button, and that one's the one with the harsh sound. So I actually used the button down there and changed the filter to the FRM mode so that I can not hear the harsh sound. Alright, so between those two modes I covered that, and now between the ODAC and O2 and the Geek Out. So between these, I still think the O2 and ODAC is a really great value for your money. But I myself prefer the Geek Out a little more than the Objective stack. And the reason for that is I've always found the Objective stack to sound spacious, but the soundstage was more limited in terms of depth whereas it's more expansive in width. So it sounds very flat. I guess you can say it's very two-dimensional soundstage with height. It has great height and great width, but not much depth. The Geek Out, on the other hand, has a more rounded soundstage. So I find that it has kind of average height, average width, and average depth, but it has a more symmetrical soundstage so that you can find images more in front of you compared to the Objective 2 and ODAC. So I actually like that a little more on the Geek Out. However, on the other hand, the ODAC and the O2 have really great power filtering through the USB connection in the ODAC, and a really low background noise with the O2. So with that, I say that the imaging is a little more clearer with the O2 than the Geek Out, and because of that lower noise floor, it allows me to isolate images within the soundstage a little bit better than the Geek Out, but the Geek Out is still pretty good. Another thing that I like with the Geek Out versus the ODAC O2 is the overall frequency response. So many people say that Sabre DACs in particular have a sort of glare with the lower treble and upper mid-range area that gives the Sabre chips a kind of unique sound that might sound harsh to some. Others find it more detailed. So I think the ODAC and O2 kind of represent that stereotype. I've always found it to sound a little bit harsh with different headphones and different setups. And compared to the O2, the Geek Out actually has less of that kind of Sabre glare, as they say. So it reduces that harshness a bit. And I think Harmonic did a great job at making sure that that glare isn't really represented in your music. So comparing the two side by side, you'll find that this one sounds a little bit brighter compared to the Geek Out, regardless of what filter it's being used on, whether it's the TCM mode that I think sounds a little bit harsher, or the FRM mode, which sounds a little bit softer to me. Also, the treble on the Geek Out sounds less grainy compared to the O2. So I find that although the O2 sounds spacious, I've always found the treble to be a little bit gritty sounding. It's hard to describe it in terms of words, but when you listen to the two side by side, you'll notice that this Geek Out sounds smoother and the treble responds. One thing I do like more with the Geek Out, with the Objective DAC, is that the bass response of this is pretty solid. You get a really nice, tight, punchy bass. It might be due to the power output. I believe this outputs 7 volts RMS at maximum settings, and the Geek Out 1000 only outputs around 4 volts RMS at maximum settings. So it might be due to power control, it might not be, but I find that the Geek Out's bass response is a little bit woolier sounding. It's not much different in terms of presence compared to the O2, but the O2 just sounds much tighter and has more control compared to the Geek Out. Not really sure how to describe that in terms of the technology within each respective unit, but I've actually been using the Oppo PM3 beta units. So I'm a beta tester for the Oppo PM3. So I've been using that with the Geek Out and the Objective DAC for my comparisons, but also just regularly use my AKG K701 from time to time as well. So I'm not sure if it's my headphones being hard to drive or what. So I find the bass a little bit woolly with the Geek Out, but it's still really good. Now in terms of value, where do I place the Geek Out 450 versus Geek Out 1000 versus Objective DAC? So the Objective DAC I have here with the RCA outs on the ODAC part and battery power with the Objective 2 as separate units. I think I paid around, about $255 for this. and the Geek Out 450 is $199, and the Geek Out 1000 is $299. In terms of value, I think that either Geek Out version is really great for your money. You're getting basically maybe a little bit better performance than the O2. Some people have actually measured how the Geek Out 1000 and Geek Out 100 IM measure. I can leave a link in the description below for that. But it measures very close, if not better, than the Objective stuff in terms of THD and things of the sort. So I think for your money, you're getting a lot out of the Geek Out, whereas the Objective 2, you kind of know that it was very carefully designed, very transparent in terms of how it was designed, and lots of objective measurements. I personally like objective stuff, so I really appreciate Light Harmonic and third-party people measuring how the Geek Out performs. And so I think the Geek Out performs quite well next to the objective stuff. In terms of what was I going to say? Oh yeah, in terms of what you get for your money, I think the Geek Out is a great all-in-one package. It literally plays any music file that you throw at it, and once you get it all set up, it performs very well. And again, I highly recommend upgrading to the latest firmware because I believe that improves both the sound quality and the user experience. And so get the latest firmware update on these units when you do get them, and just, I guess, enjoy the music. So that was my very long 27 minute review of the Light Harmonic Geek Out. And thank you for watching. If you have any comments or questions, please leave a comment below. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. Geek out.